Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Movie Mates video. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you. So today we're back with another mini review, and this time it's another Netflix original, specifically the film Mank, starring Gary Oldman and Amanda Seyfried. And this film somewhat connects to a film that we've previously reviewed on the channel, Citizen Kane. So I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain how that connection sort of ties in, what the film's about, yada yada yada. So yeah, off to you, bud.
Yes, before you switch off, because I imagine a lot of people who are viewing this haven't actually seen the film yet. We are talking non-spoilers for the majority of this episode, so stay tuned for our non-spoiler thoughts, even though it'll probably be quite a long discussion. So this film's basic premise is about the writing of Citizen Kane, which came out in 1941, and it's about the debate on the ownership of the script writing process, whether it was really the responsibility of Orson Welles or whether it was the gentleman played by Gary Oldman, Herman J. Mankiewicz. And the film presents it that he is pretty much responsible for the entire writing process, and Orson Welles just slapped his name on at the end. That's sort of in question, but any facts that we reference will be as presented throughout the film, not as history actually is. Everything we know about the situation will come from this film. Well, everything that we discuss will come from this film. So if there are any historical inaccuracies, take it up with David Fincher.
Yeah, exactly. Take it up with the director. But yeah, as Callum
Or his
said,
dead dad who wrote the script.
yeah, literally, yeah, exactly. But yeah, as Callum said, this is probably going to be a bit of a more discussion-based review because obviously it's based on real life and it's somewhat of a biopic. So it's going to be a good discussion, I think. And yeah, just before we kick off, thanks to everyone who supported the channel recently. We really appreciate that. And yeah, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Mank if you've seen it. We'd love to hear them. And of course, our email is always there, moviematespodcast@gmail.com. As always, that is in the description. So, starting off with non-spoilers, I suppose, Callum, any opening remarks from you, dude?
I was just wondering, Matthew, is your volume dialed up on your microphone?
Is it quite loud?
No, it's quite quiet.
Oh, is that better?
Let me hear you.
Testing. Is that better?
It's still quite quiet.
Is it?
But like, is it? How does it come out in the edit? Like when you're editing
okay.
it, do we
It
sound the
sounds
same
okay
volume?
in the edit. Yeah, it sounds okay in the edit, but hopefully that's okay. I'll move it maybe a little bit closer. Hopefully that's it.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. But
So
yeah, any opening
as you
remarks
were,
from you? Any opening remarks from you,
well,
buddy, regarding
you
non-spoilers?
know, we've of course talked about Citizen Kane previously, but I thought if we could just quickly summarize our thoughts on the film, sort of, I think we were both taken by surprise that this film, that was regarded as one of the greatest films of all time, actually was, or it was at
Big
least
time.
of any quality that we didn't expect. Would you sort of agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Like I love the complex narrative structure of that film. I think it's actually like it's one of, like you said, dude, it's one of those films that is lauded as being one of the best of all time. I'd agree. Sort of similar to The Graduate. Like I think those films are both incredible and rightly so. And yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of that one. Like the whole, it's a very captivating film regarding like the narrative of Rosebud and stuff like that. So yeah, big fan of that one. Big fan. What about you, dude?
Yeah, my general thoughts, and this is sort of ignorance, is that I go into anything thinking the older it is, the more I'm gonna dislike it.
Yeah.
I suppose just even sort of my distaste to some of the views of the time. If you go back and listen to our 1 hour long review of Gone with the Wind, you'll see why. But
Yeah.
that movie's fucking trash. So that's sort of tarred my thoughts of what this film was going to be, and then I was blown away. I think watching those two films in the same day was good because it was such a stark contrast of quality,
Oh yeah,
that
big
it just
time.
made me love this film
Absolutely.
so much more.
Absolutely.
And I just rewatched Citizen Kane the day before I watched Mank. So it sort of gave me this new fresh perspective, and I think it provided me with a lot of context. And I think seeing them in sort of quick succession really pays off.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely, for sure. Like, I think it's weird because, like, before I'd seen this film, I was sort of caught in two minds as to whether this film was actually needed. But looking back, I actually think it's quite unique. It's quite charming, and it sort of reminds me of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it sort of presents that the real view of 1940s, 1930s, 1940s Hollywood, and how like corrupt it is as well. Like that really surprised me as well. And no, this film's fantastic. You know, it's a really, I think watching Citizen Kane before is definitely a really smart move from you, bud, for sure. I wish I did the same.
Yeah, and sort of in reference to whether it was necessary, it sort of reminded me of the Disaster Artist. I don't know if you saw that.
I've heard of it.
Uh,
Yeah, heard of it.
yeah,
Haven't seen it.
so if anyone doesn't know, it's the film about the making of the film The Room, which was a box office and a critical disaster, and then a film was made based on the memoir of one of the stars of that film, and it was adapted and directed by James Franco, and it's incredible, but that makes sense because it's a comedy and it was sort of a crazy story behind it, whereas this film is more, as you said, a story of corruption. And I feel like that's not going to engage audiences as much because it's not a crazy
Yeah,
story. Orson Welles doesn't really figure into it massively. So I don't think it's going to entertain the masses. I think just sort of uh, hardcore nerds will
yeah,
probably appreciate this film
yeah.
most.
No, that's it. I
They're
think so.
big fans of early cinema. I'm sure if I tell my mom about it, she'll be raving about this film because she's a big fan of sort of old Hollywood.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
cool.
but I think the masses aren't going to appreciate this film.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate because I think I was being a bit harsh in this film early on. I sort of said to you off pod that like this film starts off as a slow burn, but as it grows, as it develops, I actually loved it. And I said here, I think this movie could have easily been a TV show instead. And I part of me still does agree with that. I think maybe 2 hours is maybe a bit too long. I think maybe it's over 2 hours actually. I think it might be like 2.5 hours or something, but it is a little bit long. But that being said, I think this film really depicts Hollywood as it was and as it kind of is today better than any other film I've really seen, to be honest, man.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a really important thing that we need to talk about, and what comprises about a third of my notes, is the idea of using black and white cinematography as a creative choice. I wanted to get your thoughts on whether this is a respectful homage to old Hollywood or a cheap gimmick, because we've sort of seen this before, where they make no effort to use old technology or use the cameras to make it seem like old technology. We've seen this in Metalhead, which was an episode of Black Mirror in the latest season, oh no, in the season before the latest, which I actively chose not to watch because I was so upset by that.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen Roma, but to my understanding, that there seems to be no need for the use of black and white. So I wanted to get your views on whether it's respectful homage or cheap gimmick.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, buddy, because I had it here. I had sort of felt for most films, and this is a bit hypocritical for me, so 100, like, yeah, this is quite a hypocritical point, but I think for most films, I think the black and white can come across as quite a cheap gimmick. I mean, the film Logan came out with a noir version, and I'm not quite sure as to why it particularly did that. I mean, it didn't really add anything to the film for me personally. But at least that film wasn't entirely black and white. They released the color version as well. But for me, I think black and white can be used as a cheap gimmick to sort of suggest that it's a classy film, with prestige. But I think here it actually does add prestige and class. And strangely, like the film's even shot like Citizen Kane in a sense as well. It's shot like a 1930s film in some parts, and I even think how some of the dialogue, some of the script is very 1930s. Like if you took away the good mic quality and the good lighting and cinematography, this film I could definitely suggest it would pass for a 1930s film, pal. Apart from the updates in technology, so yeah, big fan of the black and white and the more 1930s retro aesthetic. What about you? What about you, man?
Yeah, I'm normally a stickler for, if you're gonna use black and white, you use the technology that's appropriate to the era,
Yeah,
because, or at least use a film camera. But they recorded this film on digital, and they said that they used a combination of very deep focus shots, and they were very specific about where they needed shallow focus
yeah,
in order to give it like the film grain and the aesthetic of the 1930s, 1940s films. And they said that shooting on film would have significantly limited their creative choices. And I think I can accept it on the level that if that's what they had to do to make it a good film, fair enough. If if the technology was so restrictive that it would have made the film poorer, I think it's to its credit
that's
that
fair.
it at least makes it look authentic.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true, man. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, bud. To be honest with you, like if I was going to go into like individual characters in this, and the character of Herman J. Mankiewicz, like Gary Oldman does a great job here, like absolutely, and there's some amazing lines in here as well. And like there's one particular line in here which I quite like, in which Mank goes, "You cannot capture an entire character's life in 2 hours." I just thought that was so true. Like and it's quite self-aware as well. Like I think maybe that's a little line from the screenwriter there to suggest that yes, this is a depiction of 1930s Hollywood, 1940s Hollywood, but it's not the entire picture, kind of thing. And I think I think there's a lot of subtle realizations from that character. How I'm not going to give too much away, obviously, in this non-spoiler section, but how Mank realizes that pretty much everyone he encounters in Hollywood is a phony of some kind. Be it for money, be it for writing credits, that kind of vibe, those kind of things. And yeah, I think the film sort of the glamorized American city life. It's so well done. Like it's so subtle, but like it's amazing, man. I love it. Where's your head at, man?
Yeah, if we want to talk performances, we can go through characters if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
Starting with Gary Oldman. I think he gives a great performance as always, but that's not surprising to me. I don't think this character is far enough removed from the normal Gary Oldman character. But who surprised me was Amanda Seyfried, because this is the most different performance I've ever seen her play. She's playing this 1930s starlet, who's sort of been put in this acting position, even though it's not really her dream. And she's obviously the basis for the character of Susan Alexander from Citizen Kane, with whom Citizen Kane has an affair. This character is used to emulate. Well, you'll see within the film, there are shades of her within that character, and like even in my first impression, I was really impressed with her, simply because the character is so far removed from anyone I've ever seen her play. And I feel like this character could be from. I feel like the character of Mank, the Gary Oldman's playing, could be from any era, but I feel like Amanda Seyfried's Marion Davies felt authentically old age Hollywood, sort of in what you were saying.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Like from your standpoint, the Mank character is kind of timeless, whereas the Amanda Seyfried character is kind of, she's devised for this kind of era kind of thing. And I have to sort of agree with you on that one. I think Mank and Marion have some really great scenes together as well, especially as a scene at a zoo. And I think her Amanda Seyfried really did surprise me as well. And that's one thing you sort of said, but I quite liked how the characters sort of from Citizen Kane, you can sort of see the characters from the film in those characters as well if you've seen that movie. And I quite like that parallel, that dynamic. And I think maybe like you did, mate, watching it before that, you'd probably see that even more than I did. So it's really great stuff. Amazing.
And we've talked about Gary Oldman. We've talked about Amanda Seyfried. Now I want to talk about my least favorite character within the film.
Go for it.
Which is Tom Burke as what the fuck's his name? Orson Welles.
Orson Welles.
Okay, yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but pretty much there's only one person in my mind who should have been cast as Orson Welles, and that's Eldon Henson, who plays Foggy on Daredevil.
It's a good
because
shot.
He looks 1-to-1 identical to Orson Welles.
He does.
And like I just had this thought while I was watching Daredevil, and then I looked it up last night, and other people have too taken that, and seen that as well. So it's not like I'm crazy or anything,
Yeah, no, I see that, mate. That's a really good shout.
And I just think it was a missed opportunity, because here Tom Burke somewhat has the voice, but he does not have the look. He looks nothing like Orson Welles.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about his acting. I don't know, like, do you want to go into his performance now? It's not.
He's barely in it, really, but like from what he's in, he doesn't blow me away particularly.
Well, I mean, in a way, he is terrible, and I'll say why. Basically, Tom Burke. I hope this is a choice. I hope this is a choice, and this isn't just indicative of all his acting.
Yeah.
But he's done this interesting. Let's be generous.
Yeah, interesting
choice.
Yeah.
In which he decides to act like an actor would act in a film of the time, which is terrible. You know, in the 1930s, 1940s, the standard of acting was so low. Like the bar was so low. You know, pretty much within Citizen Kane, the only good actor in that film is Orson Welles, and even he's like okay, you know, he's the best by far, and he's still not that great. But Tom Burke here acts in the way that an actor would act at the time, which is just throwing things and yelling things with no nuance, instead of just acting like how a person would have acted at the time, like a human person. And so it makes his character, even though he was a real person, not feel like one.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask you, do you think this is a conscious choice that he's made?
You'd hope so. You certainly would hope so. I haven't seen Tom Burke in anything else, but I would sincerely hope that's it's a very unusual creative choice, given that everyone else in the film acts like a normal person and not a person of 1930s Hollywood. Like Gary Oldman, like you said, but it's sort of like a timeless performance where, you know, he doesn't act like, you know, Orson Welles back then would act, or, you know, or Marlon Brando, for instance. You know, I think that, you know, that good actors there, or at least performances that hold up by today's standards, or maybe like Vivian Leigh and actresses like that who's you know still holds up in today's society. But yeah, I'd hope his creative choice, mate, although I haven't seen enough of him to doubt his acting ability. But for me, I hope it's creative choice, because if it isn't, then what about you, mate? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was nice that we didn't really know the history of either like Herman J. Mankiewicz or Marion Davies, because then we had no comparison to make. You know, we couldn't be like, oh, well, that's inauthentic to the person they're playing. You know, so I sort of liked that they had that freedom to play with the characters. Because I mean, I know for a fact Gary Oldman looks nothing like Mank, and Amanda Seyfried looks enough like Marion Davies, but I don't know. I think I needed something special for Orson Welles, and I feel like for such a small role, they could have done better. You know,
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I think for this size of role, do you think the voice or the look is more important for this role?
I think the look is more important, without doubt, for me. I think Elton Henson's a really, really good shout, actually, buddy. A really good shout. And it's weird because like the film sort of, it doesn't go, you know, 100% into the authenticity of the characters. You know, like you said, Gary Oldman doesn't really look like Herman J. Mankiewicz, and Amanda Seyfried looks similar to Marion. But yeah, like you said, I think the look is more important generally. It's kind of a similar thing to like comic accuracy. You know, is the performance better, or sorry, is you know the authenticity of the character's look more important, or you know is the background of the character more important? You know what I mean? So it's a difficult one to balance, but I think this film does a reasonably good job overall. But maybe the Orson Welles character, I think he's definitely the weakest character in the film, which is weird to say.
Yeah, it's weird that you can make that comment on like, you know, a film based on fact. Like,
yeah, no, that's
it more
true.
as a character rather than as like a depiction of the person. Like it feels like there's a weird disconnect.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite things about the film was the on-screen typewriter of exposition.
Yes.
Because it's a motif I haven't seen in film before. I'd only seen it once before in a TV show called Episodes, which stars Matt LeBlanc. Because this film has like sort of a similar structure to Citizen Kane, without utilizing like the shifting perspectives, just the shifting of time. I really appreciated them outlining flashbacks, because I can be quite easily confused.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really ties into Herman Mankiewicz's profession as well, which is great. I know it's a really smart scene. It's a very smart utilization of like a scene transition. It's really unique as well.
I'm just looking for any non-spoiler comments.
The rest of mine are predominantly spoiler based at the minute, mate. To be honest with you. I
think there's just two final comments I would make.
Yeah, go for it, bud.
Well, me personally, you know, I feel like other than Mank, this film is sort of made up of like little cameos of characters. You know, it's pretty much Mank and then like a series of quite small roles.
Yeah.
So if I was to change anything about this film, I would have more Amanda Seyfried, because she's by far my favorite part of the film.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, mate. It's a really good observation, that, because the most of the film is centered around the titular character, and yeah, like you said, you know, we sort of said, you know, Marion is probably the character who's in it secondary, but even still, Amanda Seyfried's not in it a huge amount. But like you said, I would like to see more. Or I said Orson Welles not in a huge amount, and you know, as we said, a lot of it is based around Mang's perspective as well. So Even like the characters. I think Ward from Iron Fist is his brother. Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was so
yeah.
weird. Like I just saw Ward from Iron Fist. I didn't see Joseph at all. But anyway, but no,
But he's very like he has a very like slick 1930s look. So I
yes,
thought
he
he was
does.
very authentic to the era.
Yes, absolutely. I have to agree with you. He does look ripped from from that era, doesn't he? But no, yeah, I have to agree with you. I have to agree with
I wanted to ask you just like one final thing about sort of the idea of film.
you. Yeah,
You know,
go for it, bud.
there's always been this sort of debate on like whose medium a film is. You know, whether it's a director's medium, a writer's medium, producers, editors, whatever.
Mhm.
You know, actors. You know, who is responsible for the success of a film? I sort of just wanted to extend that question to you.
I think that's a really good question, man. Like, I think it's as cliche as it sounds. I think it is like a team role. Like, if you take away the cinematographer, you don't have a film. If you take away the actors, you certainly don't have a film. Take away the director, you don't have a film. Take away the screenwriter, you don't have a film. You know where I'm going with this. And I think I think within that team, you can certainly have roles which are more important than others. I think certainly actors are definitely would be up there, of course, with the most important roles, as are screenwriters, as well as directors. But it's weird because you hear a lot of people say directors are the most important, and I don't know, like producers and those kind of roles. But I don't know. I always thought it was more of a team effort. But I can definitely acknowledge that other perspectives for sure. What about you, mate? Where's your head at on that one?
Well, my view is pretty much directors are entirely inconsequential. You know, like from my
Mm.
understanding, most directors, claim, unless you're directing your own script, that's a different story. If there's a screenwriter who's presented a script and then you've taken that script and you're filming it as the director, they talk about like the director's vision, but like where how far has that vision come from you?
Yeah,
Because you're
it's a good
taking
point.
someone else's words and you're just thinking about how to adapt it, on a screen. But really, all the shots are the responsibility of the cinematographer. How it lines up, how everything looks.
Yeah,
Really the director is just telling the actors how to act. But I would say almost every actor could give the same performance without any direction, because
yeah,
the acting is through their talent, not through the direction, in my opinion. And really the question I wanted to ask you, because it's my opinion that pretty much you know I think a film can be good with a good script and a bad director, but not with a good director and a bad script. Like I don't
yeah.
think
I'd agree. I
people
would
talk
definitely
about
agree.
the greatest directors, but I think if the greatest director is directing a terrible script, I don't think they can recover a good
I
movie
agree,
from that.
100%, 100%. But it's weird because it always confuses me when I hear directors that sort of suggest, oh no improv whatsoever. That was always a curious decision for me, and especially the film Marriage Story. Apparently, none of that film was improv whatsoever, and that really sort of confused me because it always seems like the director's sort of narrowing that field of vision. And like you sort of said, I think the screenwriters like the unsung heroes of a lot of films, and I think if you have a good script but a bad director, the good script all 9 times out of 10 makes up for the bad for that bad direction. Whereas on the other hand, if you've got a really good director like a Scorsese or those kind of people with a really terrible script, it is unsavable for the most part anyway.
Yeah,
And I think history's shown us that, to be honest, definitely, mate. And I think the perfect balance, of course, would be good director, good script. But I think it's not imperative if you have a director who's not like a Scorsese or those kind of names. It's not imperative. I think there's a lot of pressure on films to get a good director or a popular director, but I think the casting and the script is what's most important. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you mentioned The Graduate earlier. There's nothing revolutionary about how that film's directed, but somehow it comes together and it's perfect, and that's through really the performance of Anne Bancroft and the script and the
Absolutely.
music.
Absolutely.
Those three factors really contribute to make a fantastic film. And even to the point where the director and the lead actor are both inconsequential,
Yeah.
because it's been
Yeah.
so overshadowed by the quality of the script. And obviously the script was adapted from a novel, so a lot of that credit should go to Charles Webb, who wrote the novel.
Mhm.
But it's the adaptation of that script, the music, and Anne Bancroft that just make that film incredible.
I
I
think you're
feel like
right.
any director could have accomplished that, because I don't think there's anything that revolutionary about how that's filmed. Would you agree?
No, I'd agree. I'd agree with you, buddy. I think you're right. I think you're right. I think Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft carry that film for the most, especially Anne Bancroft. You know, she's incredible. And you know, I think there's nothing. There's no revolutionary shots. There's no revolutionary visions. I think just the script is that good. The novel is that good, and the cast and their performances are that good that it makes up for it. Like, if you take 500 Days of Summer, for example, like my favorite film, there's no except from like maybe the obvious, you know, scene to scene transitions with the titular, you know, 500 days or whatever day it is. Like, that's not a creative vision of the director. That's in the script, of course. So, you know, I
Yeah, and
can't
it's
really
the
credit.
editor
Yeah,
succeeding that.
I can't credit Mark Webb for that particularly. I can maybe credit Mark Webb for how he wanted, you know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel to interact with each other. But aside from that, like Scott Neustadter, the screenwriter of that, I have to give most of the credit to, because you know, I actually have the script. I bought the script 500 Days of Summer, and like a lot of that script didn't make it into the final movie. So maybe that's the editor's role or the director's role. I'm not too sure. But I think, you know, I think you're right, buddy. Generally speaking, screenwriters and the performances are what carries a film. A good director maybe is not that consequential. I think you're right.
So I wanted to ask you one final question before we give our rating of massive hit or piece of shit. I
Go
wanted to
for it.
ask you, what element do you think makes Citizen Kane, like what do you think is the most you know, consequential element of Citizen Kane that, you know, created its success?
It's weird, 'cause I think maybe because I've watched this film about the screenwriter, I might come in from a biased perspective. You know, there might be other people who were involved in that project who didn't get a film, who had more of a role as well. But I think being said, I think the narrative structure of that film from different perspectives and the script from Mankiewicz are incredible. And I think maybe that's maybe the main archetype for its success. But that being said, I think the film it's just a revolutionary film in the sense that, you know, the narrative structure surrounding that Rosebud and stuff. So probably Mank, yeah, probably Mank. Although, you know, Orson Welles is good in that as well, and you know, so what about you, Bud? What about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the genius of Citizen Kane is in the narrative structure. So I would probably give equal credit to Mank and to the editor of the film, because I feel like without a
Yeah,
perfect edit on that film, it's incoherent. Just like
absolutely.
500 Days of Summer. I mean, it's edited like spectacularly, but I still sort of find it still hard to follow. But that
Yes,
was
no,
just
I agree.
sort
No,
of
I can see.
the flipping back and forth. But I suppose after you've watched it like what 80 times, you're probably like, are you like
It's probably up there.
have
It's
you
probably
got,
I'm not even there.
you
It's
know,
probably up there.
yeah, if you've purchased the script, have you like done a watch where you're reading through the script
No,
as it's happening?
no. I've just looked at the script. A lot of what's in that script is not actually in the film. So I suppose, yeah, like you said, buddy, the editor is actually sort of an unsung hero as well. Like the editor of Citizen Kane probably deserves as much props as Mank as well.
Yeah, so that's everything that I had.
Me
Was there
too.
anything further from you in regards to non-spoilers?
Nothing for me, buddy. What would you give it? Massive hit or piece of shit?
Well, I would give this film a massive hit, of course.
Of
You know, I
course.
think
Love it.
it's really fun. Well, it's not fun, but you know, I had a good
I know what you
time.
mean.
Amanda Seyfried's delightful. Gary Oldman, he's not doing anything new, but you know, that's just because he's a fantastic actor. So you know, he doesn't really need to, you know, he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah.
My one big issue was Tom Burke, but you know, it may have been a deliberate choice. You know, I don't really know what Orson Welles was like, you know, in his day-to-day life, just what he was like sort of in his on-screen persona. So I mean, he may well have been like that, you know, but the performance was questionable. Uh,
Agreed.
but you know, I like pretty much everything about this, and I found a way to respect the black and white.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you've smashed it there, but I agree with everything you've said. I'd have to agree. Massive hit for me. I think the glamorized American life, it really reminded me of like Peter Jackson's King Kong and that kind of vibe. And you know, I think I was quite overly harsh in my early notes of this film, but the film really grew on me towards the end. And yeah, I think the characters are incredible. I love the scene to scene transitions with the you know, the screenwriter touch. So yeah, I'd have to give it massive hit. Love it. So in terms of spoilers, man, I don't have a huge amount to say in that section, but I have a few bits here and there. What's your section like?
Yeah, I have maybe 5 points or
Yeah.
so.
No worries. Well, I'll let you kick us off then, buddy, with whatever you had.
Well, you know, it was basically, the only things I didn't mention in the non-spoiler sections where I was referencing specific moments because, obviously people wouldn't have picked up on that. And I didn't want to give away the ending with the sort of the level of credit, bestowed on Mank. So, the one scene that I first referenced in my notes was the scene during the election count within the club where
Yeah.
Mank has placed a double or nothing bet where he
Yeah.
stands to potentially lose or win $24,000, and that's sort of the first scene in the film where I felt actually quite tense, because I felt a real concern for Sarah and Mank's family. I sort of thought like, what a dickhead, I really
Yeah,
disliked
so
Mank
did
in
I.
that
Yeah.
moment, and I felt a lot of tension about what would happen if he lost the bet, and he did lose the bet, but
Yeah.
they sort of seem quite unconcerned about it, and
Mhm.
right now obviously $24,000 is like an entire year's livelihood for most people, and that Mank's just like pissed that away in one moment, and he seems pretty unconcerned.
Yeah, he does.
That in the 1930s, that's probably like hundreds of thousands of
Oh, at
dollars.
least, yeah, for sure. I have exactly the same notes written down, but I think it really presents like a really tense scene, one of the first in the movie. And I think that whole, I watched this with my mom, and like we sort of both agreed, like we were just like, oh, what an idiot! Like, don't bet away. Like, obviously, that's an election where you're not going to win. That's just the nature of Hollywood at the time. And I think the fact that, what one other thing that like blew me away is that the real life persona of Frank Merriam's campaign of hiring actors as voters for propaganda, like that seems crazy that he could just like get away with that, for like just hiring actors to suggest you've got to vote for me kind of thing. It's crazy to think. And I actually quite would have liked if the film went more into the politics of the time as well, rather than like entirely the focus of Citizen Kane. I think that would have been an interesting turn for it, but no, it's just crazy to see like the corruption at the time as well, and it probably still goes on today.
Yeah, when it comes to the politics, I'm really not that knowledgeable about American politics, let alone American politics of this era.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Okay.
sort of find it a bit hard to follow. But I feel like that's sort of this film showing its audience, because
Yeah.
I think it's rated at 15, but really it's for people in their 30s and 40s who appreciate old Hollywood films.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not really made for a younger generation. So I feel like a wider breadth of knowledge when it comes to politics probably would have helped this viewing, but it just isn't something I have.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I'm the same. Like I'm not huge into my politics, but I think like the corruption within that, the sort of like glamorized American city life is like it's sort of sad to see as well, because the Mank character he's the kind of character where it's like I didn't quite envision that happy ending even after the camera stopped rolling. I kind of thought like he was sort of a we've seen that his life has sort of been tainted by alcoholism as well, and that's sort of what we haven't really brought that up yet. But it's I kind of there's a lot of scenes that make me feel bad for him, but there's a lot of scenes in here that make me think, oh, like what are you doing, man? Like you're being a bit silly. But then I don't know if that's intentional or not. I assume it is to sort of suggest he was quite a complex character in real life. So the credit to the film for that. It's really it's deep.
Do you think it would have been helpful to have some context as to why he had begun alcoholism?
I think so, mate. I think so. We see it in the film. Like, I'm not sure if it's Orson Welles or another character comes around. Maybe it's Joseph. But like they come around, like they open a crate, and like inside the crate, it's like whiskey and different liquors and stuff. And like we see that Mank's clearly like embarrassed of that as well. So I would be interested to see why he sort of went down that path for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And sort of the scene where that sort of comes out in full is the scene where Mank tears down William Randolph Hearst's character when he visits his home,
Mm-hmm.
through the metaphor of Don Quixote. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think the film wants us to feel embarrassment or respect for Mank in that moment? Because I respect him nonetheless, because all the people he's criticizing are wankers. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how did you feel about that?
It's interesting. I think it's definitely a kind of scene where it's intended for it to be looked at both ways. I think I think the director wants us to feel sympathy, but also a little bit of like embarrassment for the character as well. And there's a lot of actions in the film where like a lot of elements of his life that weren't really covered. It's just the film sort of presents the Mank and Marion relationship as kind of like a jovial friendship with a little bit of flirtation. But like I think I think in real life, like they actually did have a quite a prolonged affair as well. So I think maybe the film, given that it's leaving that absent, it might want us to feel more sympathy for the character, because of course if you display him that he's an outright cheat, then it maybe sort of suggests that he doesn't deserve sympathy. But of course, I suppose everyone deserves a second chance, so I can't be too critical of him for that. But I don't know, I kind of thought that if that was left out, there could have been a lot of elements of the character that I don't know about that have been left out as well. So it's hard to judge, but I think maybe both lines could be sort of crossed there. What about you, dude?
Yeah, I really felt respect for him in that moment. But yeah, as you said, pretty much everything that we know about this character, well, about this person, comes from this film. So any opinions we have about his character, or his morality, come from the presentation of him in this film.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
at least from the presentation of this person as this character in this film, I fully respected him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I'm the same pretty much. Yeah, for sure.
And one actress which I was surprised to see in this film was Lily Collins, who's actually one of my favorite actresses. And we had talked about her in Love, Rosie,
Yeah.
in the recent romantic comedy episode. Well, not recent. It was like episode 35. Or was that like 6 or 7 months ago?
Must have been a lot
but
ago.
I just mean the most recent installment of that series. So if you want to go check that out,
Absolutely.
we talked about that several months ago. But I just thought her scenes played out like a very pleasant version of Misery, where he's like
Yeah.
on the bed, being forced to finish this script with like his broken leg, and she's just sitting there like making him tea and shit. Like it just seemed like a lovely time.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt really bad for her character, but I also felt really bad for Mank's wife as well. Like both of them go through a really hard time. Like I think he definitely prioritized, and that's one thing I can really respect about the character. Like he definitely prioritizes that creative vision, maybe a bit too much, because we see he's sort of quite rude sometimes to people in his life, especially his wife and his nurse. So no, I thought Lily Collins was great. Like she's great in Love, Rosie, and she's always good. So no, it was great to see her in here.
And the main premise of this film, or at least its main question is who deserves screenwriting credit for Citizen Kane. And for that, we'll never know. It's just a series of different perspectives. Relatives of Mank, have made the claim that Orson Welles was not involved whatsoever. And at the end of the film, we see that was sort of the assertion of Mank himself. But really, we'll never know the truth, because it was really just between those two people. So we'll never know who's responsible for it. But for at least in the context of this film, I wanted to talk to you about Mank signing away his right to credit. Obviously they had no obligation to credit him, but like, really, what asshole could live a lie so big for such a important film that someone else's genius was their own? I mean, like, how big of a dickhead do you have to be? Like, I know they have no obligation to give him credit, but
even still,
like, if someone wrote like an essay that you got an A star for, I think that would eat you up inside. And that's like, not even as consequential as something that's like lauded as the greatest film of all time. Like, imagine if you got credit for writing the greatest film of all time and you weren't responsible.
I know. No, you'd feel it definitely eat you up inside, but like you'd feel like a fraud, because I suppose you would be one. And like I can't believe, like, I personally just couldn't live with myself, like something that taking credit for someone else's work. It's I don't know, like even from like a moral standpoint, like it's not right. Of course, it's the person who had that creative vision deserves the credit, for the most part. So it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as you've said, like, it was a more corrupt time, and people were willing to stab each other in the back for bigger opportunities. And if you were wholly responsible for this script, that would get you a wealth of opportunities. And that's obviously what happened to Orson Welles. And like, Mank was sort of just left in the dust. And it says in the ending tag, this was the last original screenplay he ever wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just sad that your last piece of work was like the one that was really well respected, and you didn't get to ride that high.
Yeah,
where
absolutely,
did,
man. I feel sympathy.
I would say being less responsible for his film success.
Yeah, that sort of ending montage, so to speak, it kind of made me feel quite sad. Like that was the last original thing he wrote. Apart from that, I think he maybe edited a few other people's screenplays, but that was the last original creation. So it's kind of sad that he didn't get the credit he deserved, isn't it? But at least he's got this film, which is I suppose somewhat of a redeeming factor.
Yeah, I mean, how would you have taken sort of, you know, like Quentin Tarantino is very famous for, you know, where he takes a story and sort of rewrites history in the way that he thinks it should have happened.
Yeah.
Would you have liked like a weird Tarantino take where it's just insane and weird?
Yeah, I suppose that's what I see. I think if Tarantino was going to take this character, I think it probably would have been very similar to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, kind of that wacky sort of retro Hollywood aesthetic. But no, I would have liked to see like you know, an alternate universe, as weird as that sounds, where like Mank is like living the high life, you know, or more than he is anyway, and you know, gets the credit that he deserves. It's interesting to see where his career would have went down in that path. But you know, a Tarantino recreation of history would have been a weird but quite fun outlook, I think.
That's everything I have on the film. Do you have anything else?
Nothing from me, bud. Nothing from me. It's a very surprising film in a sense, because I think there's a lot of deep discussions to be had about it, and I think it's definitely got a little bit of rewatchability to it as well, especially with Citizen Kane as well. But yeah, thanks very much for today, Callum. Appreciate your time. Thanks everyone who's watched this video. Appreciate it. And yeah, as we said, we have a lot of other podcasts and interviews coming up in the near future. So stay tuned for those. And yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Callum. Take care, everyone. And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.